7:13.
All committee members are here with the exception of Councilor Mann. And we're going to go right into business, monthly report, zoning and light enforcement report from Jose Niner. Yep.
Are you up here?
Mm-hmm.
Up here is good?
Yep, that's fine. A new setting, right?
So anyway, you do have Mike's report. Hopefully that was in your packet. A couple of things I also sent along on Friday was a copy of basically what is West Hartford's code and property maintenance, housing code and property maintenance. As you know, they have combined. They have two different codes that cover that. Both of them, which are.
Excuse me. I think I'm missing the report.
Did you email it? No, you didn't. I'm sorry. I assume I had emailed on.
Just wanted to make sure.
Sorry. Okay. But you got Mike's, right?
Don't have any. You're David.
All right.
I don't think so.
Okay. Copy for us. I can make copies. I assumed that they were emailed to you, but I guess I didn't assume.
But I need you to be more open.
Well, I'll give you Mike's report. The other ones are kind of thick, but I'll make sure you get it. But anyway, just going to give you an update on. I did take. I apologize. I thought I had emailed them out on either Thursday or Friday, but I guess I didn't get to it. But what you will get eventually is a copy of what West Hartford is doing with their blight enforcement, and well, they don't call it blight; they call it property maintenance. I don't think they use the word blight at all, which is probably a good thing because it stirs up different definitions depending on who's looking at it. But one of the things we've been discussing internally is how to organize the department and the enforcement efforts in Bloomfield. And we had talked about with Robert and building official as naming the building official sort of as the lead person to oversee code enforcement. They already see have a lot of experience dealing with housing code issues, with building code issues, which when you do get a copy of the West Hartford code, you'll see that a lot of things that are in it also happen to be closely related to building code issues like plumbing and health and safety issues that are covered by building code. One of the things that Kimberly Rogers, our building official, is looking at is the draft that I had downloaded and try to adapt for Bloomfield to see where there are redundancies in the housing code, because there are redundancies in there that I don't know whether we want to have them in both places. The building code's already taken care of it. I don't think we need to have that in the housing code. So she's looking at that. The other thing she was looking at also, there's an international code council code that the state of Connecticut has been thinking of adopting, but it's come up a bunch of times with the legislature to sort of try to get a unified code that would be part of every town would have to pretty much adopt. But you know, in talking with the legislature and various people, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. And the reason we were trying to figure that out is we didn't think it'd be worth our time to go through this whole process just to have the state come in and impose the International Code of Council, Housing and Blight Code, Property Maintenance Code, as they call it. So we're going to be looking at possibly, and I think last time I did send you a copy of that code. Last meeting. That wasn't part of your packets the last meeting, you think?
I don't think so.
A copy of the code? All right.
I don't think so. Is it possible, though, for looking at the international, I'm sorry. Is it possible that while we're trying to come up with our own housing property maintenance code, West Hartford's already done, but while we're crafting ours, is it possible to look at the international codes to see what we can try to mesh into ours?
Well,
So that when it
that's what Kimberly's
does-
basically doing, because having investigated whether or not the state's going to go ahead and do it, and finding out that it's not going to happen for various reasons, the most of which people perceive it as an unfunded state mandate, where towns that don't have enforcement capabilities would have to all of a sudden staff up to enforce these things. Other towns do have an enforcement, as we do, some at least basic enforcement mechanism. And West Hartford has the health district that helps them with enforcing. But the state's not going to adopt it anytime soon, given this opposition they're going to get from CCM, from cost, from various towns out there that are just against any other funded state mandates. So that would be a good code to adopt because it covers everything. I think, right now we have two codes. We have a housing code, we have a blight code. As mentioned before, the problem with both those codes is that the appeal, well, at least the housing code part of the appeals process was taken out when we adopted the blight, and it was never tied into the blight appeal process. So there's no way for people to have due process when we cite them for code enforcement issues. Also, we don't have a collection mechanism. We did meet with Amy at the health district today with both Mike, myself, and Kimberly. And one thing that West Hartford does is they have their tax collector be the person, the body that collects the fines. And what they do is when it gets to a certain point, like 3,000, they issue tickets and they fine them. I think it's $79 a day for each violation that's in process. When it gets to about $3,000, then they have the tax collector go ahead and start send it over to their corporation counsel, which is their town attorney, to actually collect the fines. So that's how they do it now. I also asked them, why is it that how is it that they enforce West Hartford's? Well, they get paid extra. West Hartford gets CD Community Development Block Grant money. They're an entitlement community. In other words, they get a certain amount of money every year. If you're over 40,000 citizens, HUD sends it straight to you. You won't have to apply. You don't have to compete with the rest of the state for those money. So they're paying. They're saying that the Community Development Block Grant money is paying for their enforcement of the housing code and the property maintenance ordinance. So if we were to use that, they would probably have to hire a new inspector, and it would be with a salary and benefits, probably about a $70,000 position. So that's what we found out with them. So we're again, trying to find out exactly what's the best way to approach it. My recommendation right now would be, while we're deciding what we want to do with the codes, because these things do seem to drag on, is to actually put in the appeals process that we have on our codes right now, and also work with to find a mechanism for actually collecting the tickets. I mean, I think this is a problem, not just for us, but for the police department, parking tickets and all that we need to have a mechanism for actually collecting when people don't pay. I mean, you hope people, most of the time people pay, but obviously there's people that let these accumulate. You have to have a way of getting these back.
Yeah, I thought at the last meeting, I was under the impression that you were going to present us with some recommendations.
Yeah, and again, I reviewed, I did have, I apologize, I thought these got forwarded to you, but I guess not. I did have the draft of what you can have it, but I won't copy, I'll email the rest. This was, so the recommendation right now, because we did decide to go, to have the building department take it over, would be to just work to tweak the regulation we have in place right now, which is by adding the appeal process right back in there and putting some teeth into it while we're discussing with how we're going to proceed with what code we're going to adapt Are we going to go with the International Code, or are we going to go with the West Hartford Code? The West Hartford Code is old also. It's I think it was first adopted in 1985. I think they made some tweaks to it in 97, from what I could see.
Is it working now?
They said, yeah, they got a very well-oiled, from what I can see, process for dealing with these. The inspectors are sworn constables, and they go out and they can issue tickets. They issue, they have a procedure where they issue first a notice of violation before they actually go out and do the tickets, and then they actually use the tickets, and then if those tickets accumulate, they'll take them to court to collect.
So I would say if West Hartford is working, we should first try to mirror that instead of trying to jump the gun and go with something else. If they have something that's working, I believe that's the best right.
Yeah, that was the whole point. And again, we were able to meet with Amy this morning. But obviously, we've been busy with other health issues that have sort of taken over our landscape, unfortunately.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry I was late. I was attending a public hearing in Hartford on MDC. Question for you, Jose. I went through the piece you gave us last time. I'm sorry, coming in late may have touched on this earlier, but it seems to me the problem was we didn't have a good definition of blight other than the housing code, the building code. We have been talking about concerns about certain properties in neighborhoods where there were not only cars that were unregistered, but debris all over the front of the yard, stacked or not stacked or whatever, which made for, to most people's view, a blighting situation. Have you been, and there was nothing like that covered in the West Hartford piece that you gave us last meeting, and I don't know if it's covered anywhere, but to me that was, the crux of the issue that I think spawned a lot of concern, other than our interpretation of the building code, which I think is pretty clear and goes statewide, and with slight variance. But the blight code, I thought, needed more definition, and I don't know where we're going to get it from. Has that been discussed already? Or?
No, we just started. So there is no blight in West Hartford. It's called litter and property maintenance, I believe. They avoid the word blight because, again, blight is in the eye of the beholder, and your definition of what blight might be different to someone else's, even though you try to define that. I don't know anybody that's successfully done it without some type of controversy or differences of opinion.
Is that our commentary, or is that in the literature? I mean,
well, I think, the West Hartford Code gets very specific. It's a fairly long code, and it says here's the litter, it's tied usually to health, the detrimental health impacts of let's use the word blight, but litter and conditions that normally you would define as blight. But I think they get fairly detailed into, pipes outside, rat harborage and all that kind of stuff.
Health related.
They're all very health related.
And
I have a question.
no. So for that code, I think why it's litter, housing, property, and maintenance is because it's being viewed as a health and safety issue, more than just a visual definition of what someone might think of as blight. And I think we also have to be careful, because once we start putting the enforcement back in there, it has to be something that's defensible, right? So if you're saying to someone that, okay, it looks to be blight, we're going to start charging you, here's your notice of violations, we're going to start charging you $75 a day until it's remediated. If we go into court, it has to be something that we'll be able to stand up in court, because now we're going to be out the $78 or whatever it is that we decide to charge per day. Now it's going to take us money to go to court and fight this action. So I think that's why the code for West Hartford is so detailed. But I also think that's why we're not comparing apples to apples when we're talking about blight, when they're talking about housing, property, and maintenance. So it might be a maintenance issue, and if we can prove that it's a maintenance issue, then we have a good leg to stand on. But if it's not, then that's where it becomes a little.
Yeah, and I just want to make, it's not that it's not enforceable, we're enforcing it. It's when ultimately you have to, the ultimate is you got to be able to bring somebody to court. If you try everything, you send all the notices out, you give them 100 tickets for 100 straight days, bottom line is you're going to have to be able to take the person to court and what happens when it gets there. So, you know, I don't want to give the impression that we're not enforcing or that our codes are not being enforced. I think that ultimately the real hard case is the one that really sticks in your craw that you see out there. That why has this been going on for 4 or 5 years? Is the fact that this person wants to fight you and they want to take you all the way to the courts. And I think I heard Mike say the guy on Tunson that was out, took us so many years to get out, he's still filing papers, even though he's out of there. But that's the type of person sometimes you have to deal with in the hardcore cases. So we got to have something that A, provides a process. The person gets to appeal it. The courts are not going to want to see that unless we've done everything we can on our end, which is provide an appeals process. The judges don't want us to waste their time. And B, what happens when we win and we have to collect it? There is no collection mechanism right now to say, you owe us $4,000, who gets it?
Well, I think that's the missing component
Yeah.
with our ordinance at this point.
And we had that discussion today, how did we get to this point? And again, I think there's a lot of changeover in personnel, both at the health department and the people that were here at the town hall and pay tax, because I think there was a way that, at least everybody seems to think that when it first started out, the tax collector was collecting this for the town. It's going to tax collector. Then it went to some of this went to the police department for their case management, but even the police department I don't think has a good way of collecting on their parking tickets. They issue them, but short of booting you, which I don't think we do.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. One final question. Obviously, we're going into the budget process next month. Will you and will the administration have a proposal for us to consider during this process so that we can start the ball rolling on this blight enforcement and appeal process?
Well, I think in terms of personnel, and I had that discussion with Amy at the health department, I think, you know, we're kind of far along in this budget process to really throw money at it at this point without really knowing what code we're going to do. I think my recommendation is that I'll repeat is to just let's get the appeals process in there. Let's get a talk to the town tax collector, set up a method for collecting it, given within the current current framework of our ordinance, which, you know, it's there and it does talk about things. It may have some problematical areas about, you know, how you define blight and all that, but I think we need to strengthen what we have and really work to adopt something that we could come back next year and say, well, we're either going to pay the the health department to hire a new inspector to cover the workload, or are we going to?
I think your answer is no.
No, not my answer is not this budget season. I don't think we have the. I think we'd just be throwing something in there.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Can you do a formal write-up to the full council recommendation on how you see things so we could have something written, a document that we could review?
Yes, I have my notes from today's meeting. I have to get together with Kimberly. Kimberly's, like I said, we just decided to switch over the responsibilities this last week after meeting with the town manager, saying, look, we've got to have somebody at the division level that's overseeing this process.
So do we have a new director for the West Hartford Bloomfield office, right?
We have an acting one.
Acting itself. Okay.
So, and the other thing I think I thought I gave you something, but again, I'll hit send as soon as I get back in my office is to have an enforcement procedure manual similar to this that I drew up for town. It basically provides transparency to anyone, council, public, saying here's the steps we're going to take, here's the forms we're going to use. If this doesn't happen, then we go to this, and if that doesn't happen, we go to that. So I think it's good to have a written, the health department in West Hartford have a great thing going. I mean, they've been doing it for years,
So, well, that's part of the problem, right? They have a great thing going.
Yeah.
We have a health district that serves both towns.
Yep.
So why do they have something great going and we don't? So that's the question.
Yeah, and they do have formal procedures. I think one of the things we can start off right away too, and as soon as next month is get a code enforcement committee together. They have a monthly meeting. They come in with an agenda with the 10 worst problems that they're facing, and they sit down with the police department, town attorney, health department, zoning officer, I know there's a building official, and say, okay, here's the 10 properties, who's got the most clout in their codes to go after this, and that agency takes the lead. The other agencies pile on. You know, for lack of a better word, basically, it's also zoning. We'll send out a zoning. So that's something I can do right away, is to get a code enforcement committee together that will look at the worst cases, which I think will be some progress. So, and again, I will, right now, I'm going to go back to my office and make sure each one of you gets the emails I sent out.
Thank you. Yeah,
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jose. So one quick question. So did I understand the part about the appeals in place and the collection on the tickets, we would have to make a change to the resolution to do that, right? Or we need a resolution?
You would have
for the ordinance?
to the ordinance, yes. We
Right,
need to
so
change that.
if that's your recommendation, can you draft those
Yeah,
documents and
I can
get them back to this committee, because then we'd have to vote on it and send it to the full? Because it sounds like that's the low-hanging fruit, is getting the appeals process in place, getting in the piece about the collection, and then in the meantime, in parallel, you could be working on the code enforcement committee and the West Hartford Code.
Yeah, and I don't think we need any council action for the task. Like, I think that's just
Okay.
working it out internally, the process, because apparently there
Yeah.
was one at some time.
If we did it before.
I think putting that back into the appeals process, back into ordinance is something the council has to do, and have a hearing,
Okay.
and go through all the process with that.
Just a quick question. So once we identify a property and we start sending out annual fees, the money that's collected, where's that money going to go?
That money goes back into the town, according to Amy, in West Hartford.
So in West Hartford, it goes to the police department.
Don't they?
I think we will have.
I mean, the town.
Right, so-
I'm using the generic town.
Okay,
I don't know
so
what
then-
department gets it, or if it goes into special fund.
So it's possible then
or a
that
general
we,
fund.
as the council, can probably figure out where that money goes,
I think it's
or probably
well
create
within your
a
own.
fund or something like that to help. Right. Okay. All right.
To say it goes back into general fund, or it goes back into special fund, that have to pay
Okay.
for more enforcement, or, you know, the idea is, we did ask that question, how much money they get? Would it pay for the amount of money it would take to hire somebody, or pay the health district to do it? And I think they didn't have, Amy didn't have a good number on that, but she thought it was somewhere in the $70,000 a year range that they were getting back in fines.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jose. There's a lot of granular detail to be considered as we build this thing, and we are just in the very beginning of assigning responsibility for getting this thing built. And while we're on our side marshaling our resources to create the organizational thought, and we've had Mark and Chief Hammock and Jose working to scope out what needs to be built on our side. We've also been working with the health district, and they've undergone leadership changes, and they have their own challenges that they're working through. So it's not surprising that a lot of the concepts that you're thinking about don't have answers to them yet. I do believe that, as Patrick suggested, there needs to be something in writing that would describe the administrative transition plan of how are we going to launch this thing, how is it going to work, what are we building here. And once we have that picture down on paper, we would like for council to give us some policy direction that would answer those very questions. Where does this money go? And how does this process work? So we're not at the point yet where we can offer granular details and answers to those questions until we really look. We do know that what West Hartford has is working for West Hartford, but we don't know that what they have, it would work 100% for us. And so if it's not something where we can just write an amendment to our code and punch a button and have it go, and if we are going to have to build some code element that's different than what is there, we want you to be aware of that and what those differences are, so that you understand why we're pursuing something that may not be identical to what they have. Some of their enforcement is just off the charts. So we do have our work cut out for us, and I do apologize that you don't have details to work off of at this meeting, but Jose has started the homework, and you can see he's deep into it with Kimberly. You need a report that would report to you that framework and those thoughts, so that you can give the policy directions on how you want to see this work.
Is there a timeline that we can look forward to?
Well, I've got the budget turned in today, so now we can start focusing on some of the detail work here. But I would say Kimberly is agreeing to take this on and run forward with getting this developed and created. She's our building official, and she would be the person who's most familiar with the codes on the ground. And she's just now getting in the saddle on this. I hesitate to give you 30, 60, 90 days, but it is one of our top priorities, and I would hope by the time we finish the budget, you are considering those policies and how this is all going to work.
There we go. Yes.
Through you, the town manager, a little bit frustrated because this has been on the docket for quite some time.
That's where I was going to go with that.
And I think, yeah, and I think it would be helpful if you did have a better timetable, or at least something that commits some time specific to do this, so that we have an idea when we can expect something, so you're not going from meeting to meeting expecting a solution and having more questions. That would be really helpful. It's just, I'm sure there are plenty of projects that you have that could be also timed out like that. But unless you have a timetable where you want to hit a goal, you're not going to have a goal.
If I could provide some feedback there, I think you're exactly right. Having project management over this would be very helpful. That is something that we're looking at investing in right now as well. I would also say 3 months ago, this wasn't really on my table, and I didn't realize that that this was something that existed prior to me being here, but bringing the health district on board to deal with the housing code is something I picked up about 3 months ago. And in that time, their directorship has changed over. So I realize it's frustrating on your end because you don't see a whole lot of traction within our organization, but it's been frustrating all the way around.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience on this? No? Thank you, Jose. Up next, Public Works Facility Monthly Report. I know you're going to tell us tonight that everything's completed.
Everything's completed. Good evening. So from our last meeting, Public Works is operating in both the admin turnover space and in the maintenance space. So they have basically surrendered that other existing space now to us to start performing work. The abatement inside what was basically the existing admin office area, that was completed on Friday. We requested the town contracted hygienist to perform air sampling for clearances. We received that back after lunch today, with the spaces being cleared. So we'll start taking that abatement stuff down, and we can start the remainder of the demolition and layout and do some investigative work in that space. As you are probably aware, the most things you're worried about in construction are kind of the unknowns. So the unknowns are usually in the ground, or the unknowns if you're going into an existing space, taking ceilings down, all that type of stuff. That's what you can't see. So we're past the standpoint, 98% of what's in the ground. We've completed the remaining exterior foundations for the receiving area, and we completed the foundations for the future canopy at the gas refueling area. So with the abatement, that was an unknown. At this standpoint in time, there wasn't anything unexpected in that space causing any additional cost, but we'll verify that tomorrow with the abatement contractor. And then secondly, is going to allow us the opportunity, ceilings down, is what really was on the drawing in there. We were able to get in there previously before the abatement took place, kind of survey stuff. We didn't see any major surprises. What we're probably going to know in the next week or two, once we start doing our layout of walls and mechanicals, if anything is really out there. And this is a big concern, in essence, for us into the town, because if we're going to spend funds, this is kind of where the funds are going to get spent. And as you are, where the money is tight on the project. So if we can get past this next little hump, clearing out that we don't have any major exposures, that'll be a good sign. And everything else should go in a manner of it's all good. So we're really hoping in the next couple of weeks to really find out if there's anything we didn't know about and expose it and put a cost to it. Since the turnover, one of our things is we've been monitoring the existing space with DPW in it. As you know, when you turn over a new building, there's always sort of hiccups, things to work out as you go along. So we've been kind of paying attention to that every day. Haven't had issues with any roof leaks. HVAC system has been very good, maintaining temperature into the parameters set by the engineer. So we haven't had any problems on there. And those are usually two big ones off the bat. You have a problem, you move it into new space. So it's good there. We talk to DPW on a daily basis and try to keep them informed. There's a problem, there's an issue. So we're kind of staying ahead of it before it gets out of hand. The maintenance space, which they've only been into for a couple weeks, that's in operation now. They're using that. A couple little hiccups there we always have to work through, as with on the other side, but we're squaring those away as we go. Weather has been fortunate. We're putting these foundations and stuff in the ground. Haven't gotten into any additional costs for temp heating or winter blankets or any of that type of stuff. So we're going to play now. We're in a position where weather's good. We're going to take advantage outside when the weather's good, and when the weather's not good, we can drop back and have other things to do, because we do have enough time from our anticipated completion to kind of do what we need on the outside of the building. It isn't like we have to really, really worry about. So structural steel was delivered today to the project. So we're going to start in there putting frames in for HVAC equipment. There's quite a bit of structural steel reinforcement work as we created some snow loads in these additions, so we have to do some reinforcing inside. There's going to be some demolition of taking up concrete floors, underground piping for plumbing, etc. So all that's really going to start really getting in the process. In the existing maintenance bays themselves, those have been demoed out for piping, heaters, all that type of stuff. And we're in the process of doing layouts now. We're in the process of hangers for ductwork. Electrical is being roughed in. So we're really moving forward on those spaces. And the vehicle storage, we've been ahead of that too. So plumbing that needed to go in there is in. Electrical has been going on, or refeeding and doing stuff. So we're making progress wherever it is available to us to try to limit any schedule impacts that may come up through the process. So if you take a look, and I think this month we kind of got it right, or I got it right, because I kind of threw Nancy for a curveball there last time and got the wrong report. So third page in, talk about our budget. So the original GMP of $9,786,899. We have approved changes. Approved changes meaning that means a change order has been issued. Okay? $2,555,436. So our revised GMP as this date is $10,042,355. We have approved change events of $104,675, pending approximate change events of $23,313. And if you were to add those all together, saying those approximate pendings were true, valid, they went through. Because remember, those are numbers put to things that may happen or may not happen, right? Would bring us to $10,173,23. So approved change events. So it kind of works on the job here, is that we will present a change event to the building committee that's been reviewed by the owner's representative, it's been reviewed by the architect, and that gets presented for approval to the building committee. So they talk about it, review it, and if it's approved, it becomes an approved change event. Then on a monthly basis, we group those change events onto a change order. Because there's no contractual language in our contract that talks about change events.
So what is this 255,000 approved chain events?
Those change 255, 40, 436, those are approved change orders. So those are group change events that have been put into change orders. Because my contractual way to get a change is a change order, not a change event. So change events are approved if we have 1, 5, 6, 8, they're grouped together and put in a change order. Okay. Construction manager's contingency started out at $234,637. Expenditures to date $160,304, leaving us $74,333.
Do we have a number for the owner's contingency yet?
It's on the other sheet I handed out, and unfortunately, since I didn't get Jeff's report prior to preparation of this, you're going to see some discrepancies in the numbers.
Okay, is it possible to get some corrected?
Could I understand?
Is it possible to get some updated and
Well, yes, I mean, I used the numbers that were Jeff had provided in the last month's report for the construction manager's contingencies, and the owner's rep and I have been tracking the owner's contingency. So I feel pretty comfortable that the owner's contingency numbers are correct, that 400 between approved and pending change events, whether or not they've been turned into change orders, plus the shortfall from the soft cost, are correct at $441,200. Which leaves about $62,000 in the owner's contingency.
So just in with the month ending so late on Saturday of getting this report to Nancy, trying to get over the weekend, it didn't work out. We got it today, you have it for the meeting, so.
So could someone help me understand? It seems like we go through this every month where we're rushing to get these reports, and I mean, this has been for months and months. I think it's unacceptable if we continue to do this, where we're trying to guess, do we have the correct numbers?
I don't think it's a guess. I think Nancy takes some of the information from me and puts it on
So what
she has.
Why can't we get a report in time? I mean, I haven't had a chance to review
Yeah,
this
so
prior.
our report's by the month, so you go to the end of the month to produce our stuff.
Yeah.
So the end of the month was like on Friday, so putting all this together and then trying to get it to have it for Monday, the time frame was a little scrunched.
I would say that the only thing that really would have changed would be in the top part of the report, because on the bottom part of the report where it shows the owner's contingencies, those are actual figures that have either been approved by the building committee or have been vetted through the owner's group that meets on a weekly basis. So while Jeff may have some swings on the top part, on the construction manager part, to the bottom part, which essentially the town does not spend the construction manager's contingency. The town spends its own contingency, so $62,000 is essentially what the town has remaining in its contingency.
one of the things though with this, and I haven't really looked at this report, is we can see the breakout, and I'm sure the breakout is in here too, as how we've been spending the contingency, right? So I think being able to see that, where we're actually spending extra money on the project is helpful, and to see it probably in a timely fashion that we can read it and digest it. I think that's the only.
So if you were to look in the report, there's a change event launch.
Yeah.
That tells you approved, open, da 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 da. That's the listing of how the money has been spent on the project.
Right, I'm just saying, so here we are, I'm not sure about anybody else, but I'm not able to be able to read it and to get an understanding of it. But I mean, I get the time of the month that it ends and then trying to get us the information so I get all of that.
Yeah, so and maybe we can try to go through it on a different thing of item by item. But the change event is a listing of events that have taken place of how the money was been spent.
Right.
There is another report that our owner's rep does that we can provide you, that actually gives that detail.
Thank you.
So what it is. For instance, on the owners, over $100,000 in our approved change events are directly related to some of the MDC issues.
Right,
And that report would show that.
right, exactly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not wanting to get into the weeds on this, because I'm not sure the different balance sheets going around. My concern is at this point in time, as we're approaching the end of the project and the project cost is reaching the bond amount, that's my concern. What the gap is, how that gap may be protected, or will we have to come up with additional funds because of previous issues of the MPC or other construction delays. Where are we? What's your forecast in terms of our financial position on this? Without looking at all of this, because I agree, I don't quite understand you.
Right, so that's a concern by everybody.
Yeah, well,
And it's, but, right, so it's on the minds of us, it's on the minds of the town, it's on the architect, and because a lot of money was spent with MDC that really dropped the contingency down. So, there's a process in place when we meet on Tuesdays at our owners meeting, is that things come up, changes are reviewed, and there's a process of looking at it, and is something necessary to spend the money, or is it something that can be put off? Or is it something that can be paid for, maybe it can be done by Public Works themselves? So there's a looking at this about how money is spent, and then about is it necessary or not necessary. So I think in the last thing we had talked about is that no owner-initiated events are going to take place anymore until the end of the project because of where we are with dollar wise. Right? So it's only going to be addressing things that come up as it's an RFI question, it's a need of clarification, it's somehow a cost impact or something was missed on the drawing that has to get addressed to complete the system. Right? Not because, oh geez, we want the wall painted blue instead of black. Right? So those type of things, the owner initiated, I want something extra, are put on the list, I guess, Nancy, and we just tape them to the side and they're not going to be addressed until the end of the project.
Yeah, I would like to see someone from the building committee at the next meeting to help with some of these things. Because they're the ones that are doing the work.
I will tell you, the building committee is very cognizant of the limited amount of remaining contingency. And 2 months ago, the town manager actually convened the owner's rep, myself, the construction manager, and the architect, sat everybody down and asked for a written plan on what was going to be done different for the second phase so that we could keep the project on schedule and control the costs. And what Jeff has indicated to you is something that has taken place, but I will tell you the building committee is loath. And when I say loath, I stress that. And the last thing that they want to do is to come to this council and ask for more money for the project because they know what the answer will likely be. So, they are on board with the plan that was given to the town manager.
So what is the plan?
Well, the plan is, like Jeff said, there's no more owner-initiated request, move this wall, put in this glass that wasn't in plans because we like it better. Those are the types of things that added somewhat to the project initially in the first phase. So from the owner's perspective, I mean, there were things obviously were out of control, like the MDC that everybody tried their best to resolve. So, but I will ask this only to the building committee to attend next month.
All right, thank you. Any more questions? Any questions from audience? Yep.
Just for like, these are the change orders you're talking about?
Change events.
Change events, are they, this is a complete list of everything, or is this just for the month?
That's a complete list.
Complete list.
Any other questions? Thank you. Next item, Human Service Facility Construction Manager Report.
Good evening, Nancy Haynes, Purchasing and Risk Manager. The project is continuing to wind down. Hopefully within the next 2 or 3 weeks, the permanent certificate of occupancy will be given to the building. There's a few small items left to complete on the punch list to achieve that. Things like some door closures, a few small electrical items. The exterior site work is not part of the permanent CO, so the remaining punch list items related to that will not impact the obtaining of the CO. And then the building will be officially turned over to the town. There are still some items remaining on the exterior, most importantly the seating of the field. There's still, as you drive down Park Avenue, maybe you can see the berm. Those berms still exist in the back. There's a plan that's being developed to remove those berms and place the soils elsewhere on the site. And there's some other wetlands-related work. You'll see some ponding on the Park Avenue side, especially on the east side near the sidewalks near Park Avenue. So those items still need to be addressed as well. But those are accounted for. All the costs for that are all accounted for in the budget that you have. And based on this, there's a $20,000, almost $21,000 contingency still remaining. This number may go up and down a little bit. It depends on when allowances are released as subcontractors continue to finish their work and their retainages and allowances are released, so it might go up or it might go down a little bit. Any questions?
Dr. Bearman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I have a question, Nancy. When we first started the project, there was a plan or desire to put in solar energy on the roof. And I remember we had talked about, and I believe you also installed chases for the wiring and fixtures on the roof, whatever. My point is this. The Green Bank is back in operation again, providing money assistance for solar energy installations. And I just wanted to know if the building committee had information on this, whether or not we can make a contact to find out what the cost of putting the solar on that roof is now, because these assistances may not be available much longer, and just to see where we are. I'm not saying we have to, use our leftover money for this, but I just want to see what the options are. I know we're having a problem with lease situations of solar energy at the Board of Education. I don't know whether or not this would be the same situation, but I just wanted to get a sense from you or from the building committee as to where do we go. I just don't want to put that off for a long time.
The building committee has not done anything further on it because solar was not part of their original charge. We have been, not the building committee, but the town, I've been approached about putting a solar array, not on the roof, but someplace else perhaps within the town to supply electricity not only to that building, but potentially other buildings. I don't know how valid it is. Obviously, that would be something that would be subject to some type of competitive process if somebody else was planning on doing it. But getting back to the actual building itself, the roof can handle it. I'm not so sure that they actually put in some of the other raceways. That I don't remember.
That's what was represented at one point.
Could well be, and I will follow up on that and see if they were, but I mean, I can ask them where they go from here if they want to, something to pursue that. The town can always pursue it as well. Public Works can always, take the lead on something like that for a town, any town, not necessarily just the third part.
If I might, just to be brief, last week I met with representatives from the collective. They've asked for physical location addresses for the buildings and the properties that we have. They have the ability to take a look at the locations that we have and determine from, I think, basically Google Earth imagery, whether or not they might be suitable for deployment. The way they work, they come forward with the funding and the financing, and they actually construct the thing and then provide a discounted source of power to the town for the use of its property. So they have sent me, as of Friday, a request for information on where all of our property locations are. It'll take them probably a month or so to get analysis done on that. There's a 26% subsidy right now at the federal level for the creation of facilities like this. And at the end of the federal financial year, that rolls into a 20% subsidy. So they're interested in looking at our physical plant to see if there's something that could be definable and then apply for first through council and then to the Fed for those discounts. So we're in the middle this week of getting the spreadsheets out to everybody to say, fill in your addresses and your locations so we can get that back to them.
Any more questions?
I just have one, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. I just had a quick question regarding the landscaping around the outside of the building. Now that we're getting into the spring, if there are things that are have not survived or didn't make it, is there a plan for those items to be replaced, whether they're shrubs or trees? Or...
Yes, there is, and actually there are some of those that have existed.
Yeah.
Actually, I think a few came to us. We didn't think they were going to last, but yes, those are under warranty, and
Okay.
they will be replaced.
Okay.
That's on the punch list too.
Okay. Sounds good.
More questions?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really a question. One of the things I've noticed in that building is there's a lot of, when you're walking in the main halls, it's loud. There's no sound absorption of any kind because, you know, we don't have carpet on the floor, the walls are. So I was just wondering if it has any thought, not that this would even be included in, you know, the costs that we have now, but has there been any thought given to what could be done to make it a little less noisy?
I think you can always put some type of noise absorbing panels and other things on the walls, but we
That's not part of
hadn't
it.
been pursued at this point.
Yeah.
But that is something that I hear that as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Any questions from the audience?
Stephanie Calhoun, 383 Park Avenue. Nancy, hi. Can you remind us of what the bonded amount total was again?
22.3 million.
Oh, so that is?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Just a quick question regarding the fields, and you're talking about that berm on that back, I didn't
Yes.
notice that. Is there any, does it affect the fields in any way by just leaving it there?
Well, part of the berm on the northeast side impinges on the wetlands, not the actual wetlands, but the barrier.
Okay.
So that has to go anyway. And the town's wetlands agent is currently doing an administrative review to remove that. You know, it's not something that the Director of Leisure Services is happy with. So it kind of gives a little bit, if it had to stay, a little bit of like stadium seating.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been something that he's been in favor of, and the one on the right-hand side was so steep that it could have, no, the one on the left-hand side was so steep that it could have caused issues for maintenance, getting a mower on there. So they're going to be spread out towards that. There's a softball field behind the new field.
Yep.
That's probably where most of the soils will be going.
And just to follow up, we're going to do that before we see.
Yes, yes. Actually, well, it doesn't really need to be done before. We're going to hydro seed. We're not going to seed. It's going to be like a deep hydro seed.
Okay.
So with this weather, you know, the weather's been well. Yeah, I mean, the ground I don't think ever really froze this year.
Sharon Mann, 1 Adams Road. I'd like to ask you a few questions about the outdoor landscape to continue with what Patrick was asking. It is my understanding that the warranty on the plants was 1 year from the time they were planted. Is that correct? Or is that not?
I think it was, yes.
So plants that were put in the fall are now warranted for a year?
Yes.
Okay. And at what point does the DPW take over maintenance of these plants? And if the plants are warranted for a year, does the contractor who did the installation responsible for the maintenance for the next year? Or, because if DPW takes it over, do they then does the contractor still take the responsibility of the plants?
Well, most of the plants were designed to be low maintenance as it is, low maintenance, drought resistant. So it's my understanding that the vendor, the sub that installed them, maintains them outside from regular watering, if watering would be required. But I don't think they were designed to have much watering at all. Like the grass, no one's going to be coming in. I stand corrected. They could be having to water them. They put the tall sprinklers out in the past.
I'm talking about all those 3-inch plants that were put in that are elevated above the ground when the ground froze. And those aren't low maintenance yet because they haven't established themselves. So, and also I noticed that a lot of the mulch has been removed from the site. So who's responsible for all the weeds that are going to come up in the spring? How is that all being taken care of? Because it's not quite, there's no such thing as
weeding, but there was too much mulch actually that was in there. It was more mulch and faulty mulch. Some of the mulch that was in there was not appropriate. It was not what was called for in the specifications, which actually led to some of the drainage issues that the site was experiencing.
I understand that, but now who maintains that? Because once
I'll
that
find
mulch
out.
is
I'll find out.
removed, yeah. Because that would be a major expense.
Kevin Goff, 5 Bear Ridge Drive. Just one question, going back to the acoustic thing. What? Going back to the acoustic thing, et cetera. We did last council meeting. We got the council, I guess the town was donated a piece of artwork, and which I think is going to hang in the Human Services facility. And I'm wondering, is there a plan to add more artwork? Because I would guess that if you do some of that around the building, you will mitigate some of the acoustic problems. So what is the plan for that?
I would defer to the directors of the building. I think they do have plans for putting things up, much like you see here in Town Hall. My understanding that has been the desire of at least senior services to do. I'm not sure about the other 2 directors, but that would be in their, I'm sorry?
We have those hanging.
Yes,
Right.
the hooks to put things up
Right,
are already up, so
they just
that kind of gives me the impression that things are planning on going up.
Yes, they are.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Nancy. Well, we're moving on to new business, presentation discussion, the Bloomfield Housing Authority. By the Chairman, Mr. Bob Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Robert Berman. I reside at 8 Hiram Lane, Bloomfield. I'm also chair of the Bloomfield Housing Authority. I presented to the council in advance my statement as well as a copy of our bylaws. I had it, but I'd like to briefly read the statement that I submitted to them. The Housing Authority of the Town of Bloomfield was established by Section 8-40 of the Connecticut State Statutes of 1949. Sometime in the 1970s, the state decided to turn over to the town the low and moderate income housing units that the state had been overseeing. It had been decided that the expenses related to such endeavors was more than the state at that time was willing to commit to. At the time these units were turned over to the town of Bloomfield, it appears the federal government under the Department of Housing and Urban Development was willing to help subsidize low and moderate income housing in small communities such as Bloomfield.
Please note that at this time in Bloomfield's history, the population was around 12,000 inhabitants. At that time, the state turned 17 units over to the town. I haven't been able to find the exact date, but HUD issued regulations sometime later that stated, among other items, that no community could add to their HUD-supported housing units more units than they had as of a specific date. This capped us at the 17 units we had at the time, and we currently have 16. 3 of them are duplicates, and 13 of them are single-family homes, rated from 1 to 3 bedroom units. When we opened our waiting list in January 2015 for a 24-hour period, we received 7,000 applications. That's not just within the state of Connecticut,
And that's in,
also from surrounding states. Of those, 3,000 were certified as completed and eligible. We usually have 1 unit open up as available once per year, as many of our tenants have been in their houses for at least 5 years, a couple for around 20 years. As a commission, we're interested and willing to expand the number of units we oversee and manage. However, to do so requires additional funding, as we cannot use our HUD funds to provide housing over the 17 units pre-approved. We're looking at the possibility of purchasing units one at a time, rehabilitating them, and then either selling them for more than we invested as a way to develop additional funds, or to keep the units and start expanding the number of housing units we are monitoring and managing in town, but not HUD supported. I spent an hour driving around a few streets in town and identified 9 empty houses, ranging in size from 1 to 3 bedrooms, that in time I believe we can use to add to our low and moderate income housing units in town. This will enable us to begin to deal with the homeless issue in Hartford as well, especially since we do have some homeless people in Bloomfield. One of the things I do want to say is that we will need seed money to get started on this. I believe that if council is interested, they could provide the seed money and apply to CROG for a grant to do that. We are, as a housing authority, we're interested in adding 2 to 3 units per year at the most, because we do not want to add more units that we can effectively manage at a time. I will tell you that talking to social services here in town, they know the need is there too. They're always trying to find housing units for people. Even with the low and moderate income apartments going up on College Grove Road, some of which are designed for disabled people as well, that would just begin to touch the need in town. We have a need in town for more apartments, period, as we've seen with the success of the units in the middle of town. But at the same time, too, a lot of people prefer to be in homes rather than apartments. For our authority to deal with apartments, when I take a look at what Windsor goes through, because Windsor handles the oversight, the day-to-day oversight for us, they have 3 major apartment units that they manage and oversee. Listening to some of the issues they have to deal with, I would prefer to stay away from apartments. They're more of a problem than individual homes. One of the problems we have with the existing houses in our units, of the 16 we have, I believe 14 of them were built before 1935. That's what the state turned over. I know we have 2 that were built after 1955, and I know that because of 2 units that we purchased recently. But older units require a lot more maintenance and a lot more, cost more to run, and yet at the same time, we have them, we maintain them, we take care of what needs to be taken care of, and the tenants are relatively happy. But as I said, in 1 hour, I identified 9 empty, and I do mean empty, houses in town that are available. Some of which are on the taxes are owed, a couple of them are HUD owned, 2 of them are listed as bank owned, and the rest are listed as owned by individuals. who do nothing in town anymore. I'll answer any questions.
All right, 1 second. So, Mr. Berman, I know at one point I heard someone said that when Bloomfield was part of the West Hartford Housing Authority, there was some Section 8 or something of the sort
Yes, there was.
available. Is that available still now?
No, it's not.
And what's the reason for it not being available?
The Section 8 housing that Bloomfield had, when the West Hartford Housing Authority took over the maintenance of the district, somehow ended up in the state's coffers. And they're currently sitting there, and there's no way we can get them back. They basically were not used, they went back.
So you said there's 16 homes
16 units.
spread across Bloomfield.
Correct.
We're saying. And yours, you said 7,000
People,
applicants applied. And do you know what percentage of the 7,000 actually are Bloomfield residents?
No.
No?
I would guess a very small number, because almost, I think there were 2,000 from out of state, the rest of them were in-state. Majority of them from towns like Hartford, Bridgeport, Fairfield, Waterbury, Danbury.
So what can the council do to help better your job?
Give us some seed money.
See money, and what is that? What are you talking about?
Ideally, if we had $250,000 of seed money, that would let us start buying homes, rehabbing them as needed, because I would say that a house has been empty for at least a year. You know there's going to be mold there, you know there are issues. The chances are that all the appliances will have to be replaced. The furnace may no longer be functioning. Those kinds of things.
And what is the level of funding you receive currently for those families that are in?
What?
Yeah.
We receive $68,000 a year for rehab, and we get, I think I can check what we get for the rental subsidy.
If you can find it now, you can say.
Approximately $80,000
$80,000.
for rent subsidy, because most of our tenants pay very little rent. You have, I think, 3 tenants who don't pay any rent.
Is it possible for us to partner with Habitat?
No. We looked into that with Habitat. They were interested in partnering with us. You could partner with Habitat, you, the town has.
Right.
But we, as an authority, cannot with the current units we have. We could, if the town, for instance, were to turn over vacant the town property to us, then we could partner with Habitat. But why should we do that? You can do it directly. You don't need to do it through us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions, Bob. Maybe some confusion when the word Section 8 was bandied about. I believe what you're referring to is Section 8 that was funded for housing units rather than a voucher. Is that correct?
Yes.
You had old Section 8,
Right.
which they're not available anymore.
Right.
Are the vouchers still available in any way, shape, or form?
There's
That
a new voucher program available that would stay with the unit. But that's, we have to have the units for that.
That would be a good pairing if we were to do this work.
Yes, and that's the approach we would take with that. For instance, for any additional units that we acquired, that would not be under HUD, because we can only add one to HUD, and I don't see any point in doing that.
And how many tenants are you presently counted in our present units?
People or?
Yeah, people.
People?
Number? Idea? Roughly.
It's kind of tough.
I'm going to say 30-something.
30-something.
Yeah, because
Is it 35?
maybe 30, is it 35?
30-something is good enough. I mean, it's a small number by any means. But my concern is that we have a pretty decent strategy if we're going to move forward. I'm not sure which comes first, the seed money or the strategy, but I think it would be helpful to know exactly what you have in mind as your authority in terms of you identified some single-family units, and I think that's a good idea. I don't know if they're well located with respect to transportation and other kinds of services, but that would be a key, I would think, if you're trying to find locations. But I think it would be helpful if you want to move forward on this to have prepare some sort of a synopsis or idea, or I think you can do something without having go out and buy the properties. Just to give an idea how your organization is going to rally to do this. This is something new because, frankly, as we said in the past, we just thank you for coming in because we didn't know what exactly the Housing Authority had been doing. So I would like to see some more thought, if you want to go in that direction of doing a housing project, however number that you can handle reasonably. I think it takes more thinking up front before the money starts flowing. But I could be wrong unless other people have other thoughts about that. I don't see coming up with $235,000 on it and then put a plan together.
We have a tentative plan we've talked about. That's why we're talking about first acquiring 1 or 2 houses, rehabbing them, going to our waiting list, bringing the people in for them, using the voucher program to help support the rent for them, making sure that we've got that working the way we should, because again, when you start off, you really don't know what you're going to run into. It's like building a new building. We're tearing down existing. When you walk into an existing one, you don't know what's in there. But we need to get our feet wet first with only 1 or 2. And make sure that we know how to get say that this is going to work the same way the other houses do, or some things are going to be different. How's this whole thing going to work out? We need to know more about the voucher program, because right now it's there. The executive director of the Windsor Housing Authority is familiar with it. I'm not yet.
Well, at our last meeting, town planner passed out this report, legislative research, municipal authority to address blight. And there are a number of possible financial mechanisms available out there to do exactly what you're talking about. The municipality takes over a building, they can apply for the funding. I don't know what you're aware of in terms of that kinds of funding, but I'd like to share this with you, and if that works out, that's great.
Any other questions?
Just a quick question, because I know that you're saying that you drove around and you identified about 9 buildings that's possible. I just want to ask Indy a question, because you work at social services, so you see a bigger picture than we do as council. And I know that there's a need for affordable housing in town. Can you add some context to that conversation?
Sure. So on I would say yearly basis, we probably see about 20 to 25 people being evicted. The problem in Bloomfield that we see on our end is the fact that no one can afford the rent to pay. The average rent in Bloomfield right now is about $1,150 to $1,200. Heat and hot water included, which is about maybe Wedgewood Apartments, Berry Circle, a 3-bedroom is $1,800. So the rents have escalated to the point where people just can't afford to stay here. A lot of people call the office and they want to come in and apply for Section 8. They ask if they're in available housing, because the program that Bob is talking about is a scattered site. And there's no vacancies, and they go on the wait list and stay there for 10 to 15 years, which is unfortunate. So a lot of people, I just had somebody today come in, and I was lucky to get her apartment out in Simsbury for $975, but now she can't, move because she owes an electric bill. So it's different areas that we face with them when they come in, but it's a huge need in town for affordable housing, because there's nothing else available. And then we have about 5 senior sites, but they only service disabled and senior housing, and the wait list for those are 2 to 5 years. So a lot of seniors call as well from out of town and in town, trying to downgrade from their homes and going into apartments that they can afford, because it's 30% of your income for rent. And a lot of those places have electric included as well as heat and hot water. So this is very difficult for us to kind of navigate and manage when we have people being evicted and we have nowhere for them to go. A lot of people say, do you have a shelter in town? No, we don't have a shelter in town. And that's a whole process in itself because you call 211, wait online for about 2 hours for them to tell you that you don't have an intake appointment for another 3 weeks. So where are you going to go for 3 weeks? So the whole system is broken. It's just the fact that when people come to the front door and you're trying to help them, it's hard to kind of figure out what to do. And the crisis moment.
And I just want to add one thing to it. It's frustrating to me as well as it's frustrating the whole social services department to know we have these empty homes sitting in Bloomfield, but nobody's doing anything with them.
So I think this is the first step. We really need to put our heads together and figure this out, how we could provide affordable homes within the town of Bloomfield. I think that's imperative to make sure. Any more questions?
At our Land Use and Economic Development Committee meeting, we have asked the staff to provide us with a list of all the vacant land and vacant buildings in town, so at least we have an opportunity at least to see what we do with all these resources, or what resources are out there, what we're facing. We have no idea of what we're doing.
Just one thing, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Berman. My question is, if the house is purchased, is it the authority that owns the house?
Yes.
Okay. And then the authority also goes out and finds the contractors or
Yep.
to do the rehab on the house and manages that whole process.
Correct.
And if something goes wrong or it's on the authority to do that. So the town, all the town would be doing, in essence, is providing the seed money that would allow the authority to purchase 1 or 2
Right.
homes.
Well, we'll be purchasing more than 1 or 2 with that money. One of the things we would, if we have somebody who can afford, for instance, to rent for that property, or is interested in buying it, and if we make a profit selling it to them, and they're lower moderate income, but they have an ability to buy it, more than willing to sell it to them, because now we can make a little bit of money
Right.
to go out and do more.
So almost kind of like the way Habitat works, where
Right.
yeah.
There's similar benefits.
Yeah, just one quick question on the seed money aspect of this. The 250, I'm getting the impression there is that's to purchase and renovate these homes that then would become properties that you would add to the 17 or whatever, or the 16 you have now, the 17 you could have. You also mentioned the, $70,000 and the $80,000 you get from HUD each year for remodeling and for rent subsidization. Are you I guess my question is, on an ongoing basis, if you got some seed money to buy the houses, and let's just say for the second you don't get the model where you buy the houses, renovate it, and sell them for a slight profit, but you buy it and add it to your stock so that you have these other houses. What's right now your leeway in terms of longer term, in terms of the subsidization and the remodeling cost? Do you have extra money left over from HUD? Could you apply that to these, or would there be an ongoing component to this if you bought 3 houses or 4 houses over a couple of years, remodel them initially with the seed money, then put tenants in them as an ongoing thing? Would you need more money for rent subsidization and for maintenance at that point? How does that work?
The voucher system provides the difference between what the tenant can afford and the market rate in the community. If the market rate in Bloomfield for a 3-bedroom house is, I'm just going to throw a number out, $3,200, because it's a house, not an apartment. We would then be getting $3,200 between rent and the subsidy. Now, if you stop and think about it, that's $36,000 a year. Some of that money, of course, would be set aside for necessary things that have to be done with that property over time. But the rest of that money is now free for us to use to acquire other properties. So it gives us more money. The other thing which we talked about tonight at the Housing Authority meeting was Once we have a stock of anywhere from 5 to 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 houses, now we can go and talk to a bank about doing a mortgage on these properties. And because we're a nonprofit, we would get a lower interest rate. And if we have enough cash flow coming in, which we would at that point, then we've leveraged that money even further to, again, continue doing it. The one thing I do want to remind people of is any properties the Housing Authority does acquire come off the tax rolls. But I will tell you that some of these properties, the taxes have been building for a couple of years anyway, and I don't see us taking off in taxes. I would think we'd have to buy over, well, the average tax on a house in town is, let's say, $3,500, which I think is about right. Then to take $250,000 worth of taxes off is 8 houses. $1 million would be 32 houses. I don't see that happening in the near term by a long shot.
So just to make sure I understand, the money you get for subsidization from HUD and those kinds of things, those could increase. Like the numbers.
We have a problem when it comes to the HUD houses. HUD wants to get out of the program we're currently in. All the small housing authorities in the country, they want us out. They want out. They're trying to push us into a program called RAD, which is really where if Congress,
What does RAD mean?
well, if Congress happens to fund it's residential assisted, and I don't remember the
Development? Oh, thank you.
but if Congress happens to authorize the funds for the program on a year-to-year, which they do on a year-to-year basis, then we would get rent subsidy from that. However, Congress in the past 5 years has authorized roughly 40% of the funding necessary to support this program. So we would take a significant hit in income and still have the same obligations. And we're fighting going over to this. We've been fighting it for 2 years. We're going to keep fighting it as long as we can until we have sufficient income from other properties to let us get out from under. Once we can afford to get out from under the HUD program we're currently in, once we can afford it, then we would want to move those properties over to the voucher system as well. One of the things with the voucher system, the voucher stays with the property, does not go with tenants, which is different than Section 8. It's different from other programs. And that's what makes it appealing to us, because somebody can't take that and then go somewhere else. We would get to keep it.
Robert, it occurred to me that while you're talking, a lot of these properties that you mentioned may very well be owing back taxes. The town could then acquire those properties for non-payment. My question to you is, I believe there are nonprofit organizations out there already that look for these kinds of properties and can put them back on the rolls and also provide the subsidies necessary. A, am I correct? And B, the question is, would they do it better than the housing authority?
I don't know if there are.
I think there are.
You're probably correct. There probably are some out there.
Yeah.
Can they do it better than us? I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I shouldn't say better. I guess they're geared up to do that. They have the money from some sort of endowment to do that.
Sure.
I mean, that's what, I think a part of, if we're going forward, I think that we ought to consider that as well. I mean, I'm not trying to put you out of business in any way, shape, or form. But I just want to do the best and get the best for the town.
I don't have a problem with that. What I know about the firms that do that kind of thing is they deal with apartments. They don't really deal with. They deal with apartments. They don't deal with, or condos. They don't deal with scattered site housing. They really don't want to have properties, one here, one here, one here. That's difficult for them to manage. It's not easy for us to manage.
All right, any questions from the audience? Yes. All right, thank you. Well, what I would suggest, to get together with the town manager and come up with a plan to present to council, I think that's the best way for us to move forward from this point on. All right? Yes. All right, next item. Discussion regarding the appointment of a deputy town attorney, Attorney Needleman. Good evening. How are you doing tonight?
Well,
And just by way of background, 2 council meetings before, when we voted to appoint town attorney, I know there were discussions by my colleagues, Deputy Mayor Mann and Councilwoman Wong, about moving forward with a deputy town attorney. So I know historically we had a deputy town attorney. I think you've done a really good job over the last 28 years. I think you're going into your 29th year. But from an organizational standpoint, I think it's imperative for us to have a plan in place because you're the only one with the knowledge. And I think it's important to have someone that some of that knowledge can be transferred. So I think we definitely need to come up with a plan how we move forward from that standpoint. So I'm happy that you're here tonight, and hopefully we have most of the council members here tonight, and we could have a discussion around that and how we move forward.
well, good evening. Good evening. So this is something that several of the council members have raised on occasion, and I've indicated that I'm happy to engage in a discussion on that. I identified a number of questions or issues that would be part of the discussion. First would be a determination of the town's needs for additional staffing, because that's what we're talking about of one sort or another, not necessarily an employee, but staffing. And once a determination is made as to a need and identifying what needs there are, which aren't currently or haven't been to this point adequately met, if any, then the question leads to funding and the budgetary implications for another position. It's not going to be cheap. Obviously, the amount would be dependent on the next item, and that would be an allocation of duties. Who would do what? The charter currently has a provision for a town attorney. It does not have a specific provision for any other legal staff. I point that out, which is not to indicate that there may not be ways to go about bringing in additional resources, but it is an issue that would have to be addressed.
Mr. Needleman, can I just ask you a question? So at one point we did have a deputy town attorney. So there wasn't a charter revision. So could you explain that to me?
Well, that even predated my starting as the town attorney.
Okay.
So it was prior to 1990 or 91, and I had nothing to do with that. The powers that be made a decision, no one's ever questioned it, I suppose, or if they have, it never became an issue of serious discussion. I just need to, put it out there so you're aware that it is an issue and would have to be addressed. Reporting responsibilities would have to be clearly established, who reports to whom. At this point, the town attorney reports to the council. The question would be if there are other attorneys involved, who are they going to report to? And that is a function, perhaps, of our charter provision. So again, I don't have an answer, but I have the question which we would need to consider and decide. Obviously, something like this requires consensus on the part of the council. Different members of the council have offered different thoughts and opinions in terms of the needs, in terms of the costs, in terms of reporting, or all the issues that I've already put on the table before you. So yeah, I think it would be important, so that we're not just spinning our wheels, perhaps wasting time that is a precious commodity for all of us, that the council, together decides if there is a need, what the need is, and how to fill that need. Those, I think, are the major issues that certainly occur to me. Again, I think the first one, because if it isn't answered in a particular manner, then it obviates the need to go any further, and that is, what is the need, if any? I will tell you from my own point of view, yes, the responsibilities of the position in representing the town have increased considerably over the last 2 years. That increase in responsibilities and time expended by myself and my office has not been met with any increase in compensation. In fact, I think my budget figure has been the same now for 3 years, if I recall correctly. So the workload has expanded considerably, in part because I think this council has wanted more input from me and has looked for more guidance and direction, which I've been very happy to provide. It's kind of the old adage, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So, we consult first and then act, as opposed to act and then consult. And I consider the counselor at law to be as important, if not more important, than attorney at law. My position, I view, is to provide counsel, legal counsel, C-O-U-N-S-E-L, to the counsel, C-O-U-N-C-I-L. So those are the issues. I'm open to discussing any of them.
So here's an issue that I have, and I think I've been consistent with you, where does that institutional knowledge go? I mean, I think everyone agrees that you have a lot of knowledge about the town and what goes on here. My concern is, from an organizational standpoint, if you decide to head to Florida next year, what do we do at that point?
Well, I suppose you do nothing different than what all the other communities similarly situated are, where you don't have an employee, an attorney who's an employee of the town, or you don't have a staff such as other towns, West Hartford, who has 3 attorneys on staff. Where you don't have that arrangement, you have an outside contractor. That outside contractor is subject to being retained on a multi-year basis, as I've been fortunate enough to do, and sometimes not. Sometimes there are changes. You went through a process where you were prepared to make a change if you felt that was in the best interest of the community. In this particular instance, it didn't happen, but it could have, and it could happen again in the future at any point in time. So it's really a function of the nature of the office, whether there's an outside independent attorney or attorneys, or there's an in-house staff. When you have an in-house staff, it lends itself considerably better to a succession type arrangement. When you have an outside vendor, by definition, it's a limited term engagement. That term may be renewed for a number of years, but it's understood that the appointment is for 2 years or until a successor is appointed. So it's really it's the nature of the beast. And there aren't a lot of attorneys out there, as I've mentioned to most of you, who have a lot of expertise in this field. And honestly, I, for one, don't subscribe to bringing in people to represent the town who don't have requisite experience, training, and knowledge. I don't think we want to be their training ground and their experiment. So that isn't to say there can't be others involved. It just means we have to be very careful that anyone who is representing this town is of a caliber that we need and deserve.
And I think you're making my point, And I agree with you, but from an organizational standpoint, this is where I think we differ, where what if you're not here next year? What if you move to Florida? What happens with the town if we don't have someone who that knowledge can be transferred to?
Well, it's the same thing you would have done last year when you went out to the marketplace and requested proposals to come in as town attorney. It would be this exact same process you engaged in last year.
Okay. Because I hear a lot of comments that, we need Mr. Needleman, he has a lot of knowledge, and I know the discussion was around what are we going to do to help transfer some of that knowledge to someone else. So I think that's why the deputy town attorney came up, is to bring someone in where they can learn and understand, in between stuff.
And unfortunately, the mere fact that someone might be brought in to be a deputy and an assistant involved in the process by no means provides you or a future council with any guarantees whatsoever that person is going to be either available or interested or qualified. But I do understand your point. Again, I think it's part of the beast, the nature of the beast, which is the town historically has engaged outside counsel as opposed to having an in-house legal staff. And by doing so, there are pros and cons to each approach.
I'll open it up to questions from my colleagues.
Attorney Needleman, you have thought about those questions. Is it possible for you to share those questions so that we could probably answer them? And then, at least if we answer the questions amongst ourselves, we can then figure out if there was a need. I think what Councilor Curtin was referring to was the recommendations that were made at the time of appointment. So I'm sure we can fill out those questions and then make a determination instead of going through a long drawn out.
If you're referring to the ones I just provided, sure.
Okay.
Questions for anyone else?
Yep. Yeah, just a couple of comments. Obviously, the most important thing is, yes, mention need and the cost it takes to fulfill that need, if there in fact is a need. That's the biggest question that you put on the table. Response to Councilman Curtin. Obviously, there are a number of towns, most of the towns, who don't have in-house legal staff. They have to deal with this periodically. Is there a responsibility on behalf of the contractor to leave work product behind? How does that, is that part of the succession where information is then returned to the town, or is that just kind of financial of that?
Well, I can only speak for sure for myself, although I think I understand what goes on with others. Whatever files I have, I would be happy to transfer to a successor. It's work and files compiled while representing the town, and with little exception that I can offhand even think of, there would be no reason for me to want to retain them or not to turn them over. That's not an issue.
Ken McCleary, 2 Woodward, Bloomfield. Quick question, the code of ethics for attorney, I'm not an attorney, but I kind of was very interested in this topic and I looked it up. In any event that the town does decide not to renew your contract, it's a part of your code of ethics that any ongoing cases or prior cases will be transferred over to the new town attorney, is that correct?
That's what I just said.
Okay, great. Second question is, do you, when I was on town council, a lot of the cases were outsourced, like your labor attorney, your everything, right? Most of the work is outsourced to other firms, right?
Not really.
What percentage of the work that you do for the town is outsourced?
A small percentage. Other than labor, where we have a separate labor council that this last council and this council approved that arrangements. Other than that, very little is, to use the term, farmed out. We did bring in a special counsel on 2 tax cases. And certainly, there have been a handful of cases over the years, but it's really that. It's a very small number.
Okay, my final question, if this council decides to do an appointment of a deputy town attorney, would they be reporting to you, or would they report to the town manager? What is the structure of the reporting? Would you help develop some gaps that you see that you're not an expert in, that may be blind spots for the town, that this person or persons could take on?
Well, as I indicated, that reporting responsibilities is one of the items I indicated would have to be addressed. So yes, the answer is of course. Number two, in terms of those areas where I don't have expertise, and please don't misinterpret my comments, but after all the years of service, I've developed a fair amount of expertise broad-based. In those instances where I haven't had the background or the knowledge, it has been farmed out, but again, I'm indicating it's been a very small number, and those are typically matters that require very, very special expertise. I have brought them in some cases with the express direction or consent of the council, and others we've talked about it informally. When you were on the council, I think that was one of the occasions where I did come to you and we discussed
So
it.
one more follow-up. You said that this was before your time. While serving, I think you've been serving since 89 or 90, is the town?
In 91.
91? In that period, was the deputy town attorney still, did you work with the deputy town attorney? And if you did, during any portion of 91 to present, what was their job?
Well, I think as you know, for a number of years, there was a deputy town attorney consistent with the ongoing practice that started before me. At some point in time, the town council decided, and I don't want to speak for them, but they decided there was insufficient either need or cause to continue with the deputy town attorney, and it was no longer funded.
So
I took over all responsibilities, and it's been that way certainly more than 10 years. It could be 15.
What were the job duties of that deputy town attorney? And is there an opportunity, because I know the Board of Ed has their own separate attorney, is there an opportunity to consolidate that, bring the deputy town attorney to save some money on the Board of Education side, bring the deputy town attorney over here to the town side, and then they can work together with you and then get the transferable knowledge?
Probably not, because the Board of Education requires someone who has expertise and either limits their practice or primarily limits their practice to school education law. And that's how most communities handle it, the majority of the communities. So I don't see that being realistic or practical or acceptable to the Board of Education. With respect to the other part of your question, the duties were always, well, it was always a fuzzy area. What matters would be delegated to whoever was the deputy town attorney. I was charged with allocating duties to that person because under the charter I am the chief legal officer, if you will. Again, a lot of the times what I did or didn't do was influenced in part on the individual, whether he or she had the background, the training, the experience to handle a given matter. Many times I was the one who was best able to provide those services, and that was always the key to how matters were assigned.
So, Mr. Needland, I think the question, and I know for a fact that that attorney at that time actually did the Board of Ed work per se. And I think that's why it's important to look at it, because once again, as a town, we're looking cost savings. Even if we have someone who is a deputy town attorney working on the Board of Ed side, would still have to get the knowledge of things that are going on in the town side. But my question is pertaining to the retainer back then, if you could recall, how was the retainer split?
Well, I don't remember the exact dollars. I will say this, that when the deputy position was eliminated, the budget was reduced considerably. A small portion, and I don't remember numbers, was transferred to the town attorney account, but the majority of the funding that previously was allocated was removed from the budget and was never reinserted. And just to let you know, one of the reasons that the prior arrangement didn't continue was because the Board of Education did not want to continue with that arrangement. They wanted to be able to retain someone who they deemed to be an expert in education law.
So I also know that one of the stipulations or issues that came out of that night was about diversity, making sure that there is some diversity within our representation. So how do you plan on addressing that?
Well, I did what I thought made sense, and I've asked several of you for suggestions, and I haven't gotten a lot of responses. Two names in particular were suggested, and without getting into any individual, one has zero experience in municipal law. The other has, as far as I know, limited experience in municipal law issues. As I've explained to you that primarily attorneys of color gravitate to areas involving personal injury, criminal defense, general practice. The exceptions are those who may work for the very, very large corporate type law firms and don't get involved in municipal law either, so that the pool is limited by those factors. So I've asked all of you who've discussed it with me to help me identify people, and I have indicated to you that I would explore anyone that was suggested, or tell you why I didn't think, that wasn't an option.
So I'm going to find some.
Well,
I'm going to find some for you.
I'm all for it. I told you that.
Councilman Calhoun.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Neiman, in treating this town as if it was a corporate entity, do you currently have a succession plan in place currently?
No, as I've told you, due to the nature of my appointment and the position and how the charter dictates it, I can't prepare and direct a succession plan because my term is for 2 years or until a successor is appointed. So I'm in no position, I have no authority to establish a succession plan and bind a future town council.
Okay, so I guess maybe I'll ask this in a different way. As far as with pay, are you prepared in preparing the paperwork, the current litigations that you're currently working on? Because anything can happen to any of us. Will whoever steps in after you, could they step in and keep this town running with the litigations that you currently have?
Whenever I'm currently not available or unable to attend to something, I have an associate who has a very good background in municipal matters. He's a former first selectman in a neighboring community. He's been working with me for 10 years and been very involved in handling town matters with me as my support staff. So that's an immediate need. In terms of other needs, any competent, experienced municipal attorney would would be able to step in the event of my premature demise or incapacity, let's put it that way.
Councilman Buck?
Yeah, I had a question similar to Councilor Calhoun, because I know you do have an associate who is sort of versed in what's going on, and you know, that came up a few weeks ago when you were on vacation. So could you just say a little more about how much, Attorney Lingenfelter, right. So could you just say a little bit more about how much you brief him on what's going on, and you know, what you indicated about him being able to sort of handle matters in an immediate sense before we went into a replacement mode?
Well, every case is different, but for instance, the most recent matter, the dog case, he was intricately involved, working on that with me. I guess the short answer is he has a general knowledge of virtually every matter I'm working on, and a particular knowledge of at least half of what I'm working on. Many of the things just wouldn't warrant the time to brief him on because they're relatively minor matters. But any matters of substance, he has a general familiarity with them or the issues involved in them.
You got a question?
I think we need more discussion among the council, because I think I go back to what you said, Attorney Needleman, about what is the need of the town? Where is the additional staffing needed, and the funding and the budget allocation of duties based on what the charter says, and reporting responsibilities. So I think we have to somehow define what it is that we're really looking for before we could go to you. Now, I don't know if Attorney Lingenfelter, if that person is your associate, would we be able to subcontract with him as a town attorney or a town employee who acts as a deputy town attorney and has certain things that are assigned to him, and who would make that assignment?
Yeah, I'm not advocating that. What I'm telling you is, based on one of the concerns that Mr. Rickford has articulated, and it's a valid question, you're not going to be left high and dry in the event that I'm incapacitated or unavailable, whether it's for a week's vacation or a longer-term situation unplanned. There's someone there either with me or independently without me is going to be able to fill any immediate needs. So my point is, you don't have to worry about that type of situation.
So, one more question. So I know when I served on council, one issue particularly that I was very interested in was the tobacco 21 issue. And what is the process for council members who have policy ideas to submit policy ideas to get it legal review? Do you provide that support, or could that be something that the council could go to a deputy for? Part of their role is, if you have a policy recommendation that you have perceptual, the town attorney or the deputy town attorney could review that piece of policy to make sure it's in accordance with the law. Right now, there is no process for if the mayor or the deputy mayor or the council person has a policy idea for a legal expert to write.
Oh, that's not true. I've probably reviewed dozens of proposed policies or drafts, and have commented. I do that on an ongoing basis. However, I indicated on more than one occasion that, in fairness to me, in the process, 9 individual council people making those kinds of requests is just not practical or fair, that I've asked the council to do the initial legwork, do an outline, and then bring me into the process. I'm not a policymaker. people who sit up here are the policy makers. I'm the counselor and attorney who help get them to where they want to be as a matter of law. So I've done it and will be happy to continue doing it.
Yeah. Thank you. I think the council as a body, because I have to be honest with you, I've been on the council now going into my third year, and as much as I've had really good experience with you and you've given me good legal advice on the various issues, there's no way for me to measure from year to year the various cases. I can't tell you right here how many cases you've won, how many cases you've lost. So I think there's some measure that we need to see as a body to figure out exactly to measure the work that you're doing. I think that's fair.
I think it's fair.
Especially if you're going to be going into, let's say, the council, whoever the council is 2 years from now, they have to have something to measure up to say, okay, we're going to hire someone, here is what was done, and this is what we need. But right now, I don't think any one of my colleagues can outline the work that you do and whatever success that you have. I mean,
we haven't lost any cases. Let's put it that way. But again, losing and winning is sometimes, you know, something more than 100% win or 100% lose. But I do report to you every month in executive session the status of all pending litigation. So I think this council, meaning last term and the current term, have been provided with about as much information as is available, and then it's up to you to draw your own conclusions. But I'm happy to try to make that either easier to figure out or understand or tally, as you suggested.
Any more questions? Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity, and I will follow up as requested.
Yeah,
thank you.
Actually, this is a nice segue into the next item, discussion regarding the communication with the town manager and staff. I think this is perfect. I think we need to start figuring out how, Attorney Needleman just mentioned, hearing from 9 council members sometimes can be counterproductive. And I think the same thing goes for the town manager. Hearing from 9 of us could tend to be counterproductive. I think the one area that I know I'm concerned with, when a council sits down and come up with either policies or to put certain things in place, for instance, we have 3 or 4 projects that we want to work on, that's great. We all agree to that, we're going to work towards that. What I see happens more often, and it's good because I think a lot of us really care, we want to have different projects going, but I find it being counterproductive when we have all these little side things going on. So I think it's important to start a dialogue, to come up with a plan of action on how we communicate with the town manager, and how we stay consistent with the things that we have on the agenda and what we want to accomplish, because more often we try to do too many things. So I wanted to get this on the agenda because I think, number one, none of us should be reaching out to staff members. And I know sometimes we get carried away, but I think all of our point of contact should be with the town manager and the town manager's office. So I just wanted to open this up for discussions, to hear from my colleagues on this committee, and we have council members also in the audience. But I think we need to have some consistency in how we communicate with the town manager. I know we have a mayor who is supposed to be the person who is communicating also with the council. I just want to make sure we have some consistency, because too often we have a lot of side conversations. Case in point, I got an email from the town manager in regards to the historical, the Bloomfield Historical Society. Yeah, Society. And they came in with a budgeted item. For me, I thought that would be coming through a committee or so, but someone came in to the town manager, and that's put.
Is it a town building?
It's a town building, yeah, I'm aware of that. But I'm just saying, we're hearing all these last minute things. You know, so I think we need to have certain consistency, because I'm telling you, the budget is not going to be able to sustain the budget. It's just too much. So I think we need to have some sort of consistency.
Just a clarification, it's our building, but it's leased, correct? So someone is leasing it.
Correct.
So even though it's our building, I would assume, and I'm not even quite sure what the details is, but I'm assuming that whatever needs to happen in that building is their responsibility. I think, I don't know how that goes. Do we just take care of the maintenance of it? We take care of the maintenance.
You take care of the maintenance and any capital improvements.
Maintenance and capital improvements.
We don't know any of this.
I don't know, I have no clue. I'm just asking, so I didn't know.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say typically it's all drawn up in how the lease is written.
I've never
You know,
seen
so-
it.
Yeah. Once again, I was just using it as an example where, I saw something coming through, and I never saw it come through a committee or any discussion pertaining to it. And I think we just have to be careful. You got a question? Okay.
I'm sorry, but, so I know Councilman Kenneth, former Councilman Kenneth Clary, when I was on the town council, we had this long process about BATB and leasing of space and making sure there's some contracts and insurance and stuff. Are we being consistent across the board to all organizations? Because then it could look like we are picking winners and losers and targeting certain organizations. And so, for the council, does the Historical Society, not for or against it, do they have a contract? And what does the lease in the contract says?
There is a lease.
There is a lease.
It's been in existence before I got here. I can forward it to town manager.
Sounds good.
Just a question.
It has like no expiration date either, just like.
Do you have any comments?
Yeah, I'd like to shed a little light. When the Historical Society came and asked for some help at the building, I reached out to Public Works to find out what's been the extent of our support of the historical buildings that we currently have. And it's been significant. We take care of the plantings around them. We take care of repairs at them. We have been taking care of these buildings for some time. And when I was made aware that this particular building is the one that the public's coming in and going out of to pick up information about the town's historic sites, and they're looking for assistance on accessibility to that building. It's, even if it is a leased building, being able to have an accessible ramp there for the public to get in and out of. This kind of began ticking boxes for me on, yes, okay, it's open to the public, it's there for the public to get information, we've been taking care of the buildings, yes, we probably should get involved. The message that I left with Bill when he came to visit me over this was that I felt like the society needed to have some skin in the game. And they've gone out and obtained a proposed price, and I am trying to help them hold that price. But I suggested that they come up with some matching funds, that they work to create, some contribution towards the project themselves, whether it be through fundraising or donation or whatever. And he indicated that they would be working on that. I've got the entire amount for the project inserted into the budget. Of course, that's something that council has purview over from, I think, today forward. I've submitted my draft. So it'll be in council's hands, and we will have time to review the lease. But based on the way we've handled the historic buildings in the past, what we're doing at the park facilities, at Philly House and everywhere else, and the fact that this was an accessibility issue, I jumped in and said, I'll put it in the budget draft.
So this was an oversight because we had the CIP meetings and it wasn't part of any discussion. So
Well, he actually, I think his initial conversation with me about it was several months ago. I did not have it in the CIP, but he reminded me that we had the conversation, and so I felt like it needed to be in there.
One second, any questions from the committee?
Well, I wasn't aware of what this item was for. Was this what is about, the issue with the Historic Society?
Well, no, I was using it as an example. This item here is how do we handle communications with the town manager's office and staff. And part of my statement, I don't know if you were here, I don't think that any council member should be engaging with staff. I think period. I think the town manager is a point of contact for us. And someone please correct me if I'm wrong. But I think we need to be consistent on how we communicate. But I think it could be counterproductive if we have 9 council members reaching out to the town manager on a consistent basis. So,
Are you excluding councilmen from discussing with staff who support their committee?
correct.
So you can't even talk to the person who supports your committee?
I think everything,
Work out an agenda or talk about issues?
I think it all has to go through the town manager's office.
That means he has to be part of the conversation?
Absolutely. He's the town manager. He is,
You think that's practical?
I think it is practical. And I think that's where information is now in the town manager's office, and he knows what's going on. So I think it's important. I want to hear from my colleagues, but I think it's important.
Okay, so I have through you then to the town manager, if you will. Mr. Manager, with all the different committee meetings which are already become an issue with your staff, because there are so many staff people engaged in providing services to these committees that they may have some difficulty doing the work that they're initially hired for. And you also would have to fit in that same discussion if, in fact, we were to include you in every discussion to set up an agenda or talk about what's going to happen at the next meeting. Do you feel that that would be a good use of your time?
Chair, Councilman Mann, I don't think that it's practical for us to ignore the weight and the expertise that staff liaison brings to the committees. I think the reason why we have them in the committees is their areas of expertise are germane to the work that the committees are doing. And I think that needs to continue unfettered. I think that those staff members are valuable and are helping the council do their work. I have not had situations where council members are in front of me demanding that I go do work. So far,
Change that.
my interaction with council has been advisory. Council has inquired about how we handle work, what we're doing. I think the charter says for the purposes of inquiry, council can ask staff. And that, I've always taken that to mean if it's a yes or no question. You know, I saw the tow truck was dropping something off at Public Works. Was that a wreck? Or, you know, what are we doing with the tractor out on so-and-so? Those fast, easy, yes, no kinds of, or very short answers, I think staff is capable of doing that. When it comes to extended discussions with staff or where you're looking for staff to provide feedback that's going to require additional work or analysis, I believe that needs to come to my office because I can't foresee what their workload is if I don't see those things. But I think the charter's kind of clear. It's possible to put a finer point on that, but no, I can't be at every meeting and do all of the work that liaison is doing and do what it is that I do too. We wouldn't get anywhere.
I think that was the point. I think that you just hit the nail on the head, is asking staff to research or asking staff to look up, look in. If it's not that, hey, Granby Street was closed off. What happened? It was more like, okay, I need for you to do some research about such and such and such. That becomes a problem. So I think town manager was very clear, and I think Councilor Curtin, when it comes to those situations that might take more than 5 minutes, maybe, because now you're directing staff to do something that is really not our job.
And Chair, if I could, and I hate to stretch this out, I know that it's a long meeting already, but we are in the middle of doing a lot of new things. And that means there's going to be lots of questions. And really, some of this is test as you go. But I would say in general, if you're talking to a staff member and it's going beyond asking for a piece of information that you know they probably have in their head, then that probably should come to my office so I can help work through that, especially if it means we're going to launch into something new or address an issue that we haven't addressed before. And I would also like to commit to the council. It's my goal to make sure that the entire council has all of the same information at the same time as quickly as I can produce it. And if I am missing a beat, or if there is somewhere where a council member feels like they didn't get the same information that somebody else did, I need to hear that. I need to know that, because that means I've got a communications loop that I need to improve. But given the fact that we're going through a lot of changes and we're doing a lot of work all up front, it's very difficult to keep you all informed at the same time. It's a significant challenge.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So my only point is, I think I agree with a lot of the discussion. I think certainly an easy question that could be answered with the pickup of a phone, and what's happening here, is this correct, yes or no? Definitely, I could see doing that. But certainly anything else, I agree, for consistency, for communications, for efficiency of communications, it should all be directed through the town manager and through your office, whether it be through the assistant to the town manager or some other means. But it shouldn't be coming from all the councilors going to all the different department heads. It should come through your office. Now, my problem is, how do we, I hate to have to say, let's create another policy. I don't really want to do that. But how do we make that sort of the house rule that this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to abide by, and get everyone's agreement on it without putting it into writing and approving it and making it some other kind of policy. So while I agree that there's certainly times where we don't have to involve the town manager's office, more times than not, I know I'm very happy to see your emails. I don't always respond, but it makes me aware of things that are happening, and I know that others are copied on there, so I know that I don't have to take any further action, and I feel confident that we all know the same piece of information. So I just think that, I agree that communications with town manager and staff, the town manager reports to the town council. Your staff does not report to the council, they report to you. So for me to be going to your staff is wrong. That's going beyond the chain of command. So if I have an issue with somebody of your staff, I need to go to you. Or if I want to communicate with them about something, I want to do it through you. So I think that's something that we're all going to have to somehow come to terms with and agree on without.
Yeah, I think it needs to be a commitment from each individual council member. I don't think we need a policy for that.
Right.
That should be automatic, that the town manager is the point of contact when it comes to any council issues or so on, not the town staff.
Maybe it's as simple as an email from Robert, from the town manager, that says, going forward, please, all communications except for, those brief questions, all communications should be funneled through town managers.
I think I've already read that.
1 second.
So back to my question. So when we're planning for a committee meeting, a visit to the office to talk to the town planner, see what's on his agenda, go over it, is not appropriate? Or is it appropriate? Or do you have to be?
Let me give you an example. No, let me just step in for a second. An example, I think usually what I do is work through India I mean, when it comes to agenda items, I reach out to India reach out to the town staff, correct me if I'm wrong, and they work through the agenda. And if I have items, I usually forward it to India to get it on the agenda. So that's what I do as a practice.
Glad to hear that, but we also know that people have asked staff to prepare proposals and prepare RFPs and other kinds of things. That, I think, is wrong. That has to come back to the manager. That's something that does occupy town staff, and it does require, a management decision. But just because I think there's more to some of these committees than just talking about what's funneling up through the system of what comes in over the transom, so to speak. I thought we had a broader sense of what the town needs and what we want to do. Certainly in land use and development, that's extremely broad. And if it's just going to pick up little stuff, we don't even need the committee. I think there's things we want to discuss so that maybe we can go further than where we are. And that kind of input requires some discussion.
I totally understand the juxtaposition here. Because on the one hand, a lot of what you're trying to deal with is complicated and it's forward-facing, which makes it very difficult for you to choose a path. There are two things I can offer that may help. One would be a commitment to the council. I mean, I'm happy to send an email out to the effect, but a commitment to the council that would say, if we have this general understanding about the level of communication and the demands that council members might present to staff when it comes to asking for information or task versus tasking, I will report. If staff comes to me and said, I'm just getting hammered. I've had 3 council members asking me to produce this report and that report, and I need this. If I have staff coming to me like that, I will make the commitment to come to the mayor and the vice mayor and say, as a payer, I'm getting hammered. I've got council members going direct to department leads, and it's taking people off staff, off task, and we're having issues with that. And I'll bring it back to you guys, and you guys can decide how you want to handle it. When it comes to working substantive issues through the committees, I've made notes here tonight. Part of our struggle is we are picking up speed and tasking at the same time. We're struggling this evening over building committee issues associated with the DPW building, and that data didn't actually hit Nancy's desk until Friday. And here we are trying to deal with it at a committee level, and we can't move that fast. It's too important what we're looking at. You need thoughtful consideration from staff before you even dive in. You need to have the benefit of that information in your head before you actually hit the dais here. So I've got notes to get together with India and Sharon about just timing on how are we getting it to you so you have time to digest it. And I think if we can address that, I think that will give plenty of opportunity for a council member to say, I'm really concerned with this housing code issue. Where do we stand on this? I've got all these questions. Robert, can I sit down with you? And my natural response is going to be, of course, let me get Jose in the room because he's got all the answers. And we'll sit down together and address those questions. And that should help facilitate some of the chairs as they approach those detailed issues in front of them. But we have a timing issue in terms of how quickly we're trying to turn things around, and we have a carrying capacity issue. I'm trying to address that with some staff issues on my side, but we don't have the solution to that just yet.
Well, I think we have a good solution whereby anything that's written to a town staff person also have copies of the manager on, so that you're aware that something is being transmitted, or information is being requested, and then you can step in and say, well, this is inappropriate. I think that's a good check on that situation that we just mentioned.
That does help a lot, but I'll be honest with you, the incidental little small exchanges of information that I have with you guys over things like that sometimes are way more valuable to me than the email, because honestly, I probably get 120 emails a day. And I'm trying to sort those on the fly and get those dealt with quickly without submerging my staff, because I know their carrying capacity is already at maximum too. So I like the fact that I get to hear what concerns are and what the issues are, and I can contemplate those when I'm directing staff. It's helpful to me. And I believe that I can accommodate additional inquiry from council by pulling staff members to the table. So I appreciate the flexibility, but I think we have a timing thing right now.
Perfect. Good question. What happens, because I know when I was the chair of public safety, there were a number of things that came up in committee that requires follow-up from town staff. Deputy Mayor Mann is absolutely correct. As a chairperson or a member of the council that oversees a particular, for example, the communication system, right? That's been dragging. And if you're not able to have a conversation directly with the police chief, directly as the chair, and you have to go to another level from the town manager, it like slows the process up of information. So my recommendation is maybe each chair of the council has a one-on-one with their staff person monthly, a check-in. Maybe it's 30 minutes. Because it's hard, particularly with the TIF district. It's hard to make decisions through the town manager. Like, yeah, he could be CC'd on it, but it's very important for a committee chair to have direct communication with their staff person that is assigned to that committee. Thanks for your comment, Mr. McCleary, but to be frank, I've seen too many times where you're dealing with town staff, communication is different, and then the town manager is looped in later on, and there's confusion. I mean, from an organizational standpoint, I think it's imperative for us to communicate with the town manager and not with staff level. I think the town manager said it perfectly. If there's an issue, then he can call a meeting and we can come in to meet with, let's say, Jose, for example. I think it's counterproductive when you have too many council members reaching out to staff. And I've seen, and we've talked about this, where staff is frustrated because they have their own workload and they're hearing from everyone else. You can't have 9 bosses plus a town manager. I think it's unrealistic. I think we need to have some consistency, and that's what I
Follow up to the comment, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I'll try to be really brief. I think tonight's committee meeting was a pretty good example of some tune-up work that we need to do. If I had known that we weren't going to have the exhibits out on time for Jose's topic, and if I had known that so much was up in the air about where that is in terms of administration and management and coordination with the health district, I would have come back and said, we would love to do this tonight, but we're not prepared. We don't have what we need. And so I think that the agenda setting process for the committees needs to be looked at in terms of, with council meetings, we get together, we look at the agenda and everybody agrees, oh yeah, we're ready for these. But with the committee agenda setting, those are set and out the door before some of us see those. And so I think we need to begin looking at, are we ready? Councilmen, do we have this put together? Can we get this to you at this time?
Right.
And we've got to start talking about that.
Yeah, to be fair, however, a lot of the agendas are set by staff and they're still not ready. And that's part of the problem, because I specifically on my committee said, if you're not going to be ready, let me know. I don't want to call the meeting. They called the meeting, they said, we're ready, and it wasn't, it really wasn't worth coming in for.
All right, we're going to move on. I was hoping tonight that we would have the MDC Commissioner, Mr. Byron Lester, to talk about the MDC. That's a hot topic right now, talking about the ad valorem tax and so on. So hopefully we're going to have a special meeting to have him come in sometime this month. And I think on the 11th, I think an email went out for him for the 11th. So hopefully we'll get back to him. Obviously we're going through budgets. But yeah, no, we're going through budgets and we're hearing a lot about the MDC. We received an email today from our neighbors in West Hartford saying that they support, X, Y, and Z. We need to hear from our commissioner. And and I have some questions, and I hope that other members of this body and the council would have. So I don't think we have a lot of town manager comments tonight. Robert, do you have?
Yeah, question.
You have a
Well, I just
question?
had a question on
Sure.
that. I mean, I think, well, there are two things with the having Commissioner Lester come in.
Yeah.
Obviously, one thing that we've talked about a long time is the reporting requirements, where we have asked for the reporting requirements to be put in place for the various committees, such as the various things such as the MDC, CROG, et cetera. So I think that does need to be taken up. Secondly, if we do have a special meeting to hear from the MDC, two pieces of that. One is I would...
Not the MDC, the MDC commissioner.
The MDC commissioner.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, for the MDC commissioner.
Yeah.
I guess I would just prefer that be a council meeting. I don't know why we couldn't put that on a council agenda if we're going to hear from that, because I'm as interested as that is, you know, on this committee or whatever committee as probably anyone else in this room. So I don't see a reason. I don't know which committee, if it's the ad valorem, I have no idea which committee it should even go through.
Oh.
And if it's just a report, maybe we just need to bring it into to the council as well.
Yeah. Thanks for your comments. Any comments? Any public comments?
To fairness to Mr. Lester, tonight was the...
Yeah, we did receive an email.
I just, because they're recording, so I just...
Yeah, we did.
Because I do like Mr. Lester, he is at the MDC
Yeah.
meeting, and they did approve the discounted rate
So they did approve it.
tonight, and only 4 commissioners voted against it. Including Mr.
Voted against it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to get that on the record, because it's on the agenda, that makes it seem like he's not here.
Okay. Any other public comments? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes for February 3rd?
So,
Second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
aye.
Motion carried. You wasn't there. Yeah. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes for February, special meeting for February 19?
So,
Second.
Correction.
Yes.
I believe on the second page, there was a typo there, with the designation of the deputy mayor in the middle of the page.
Okay.
But there's also another section, where is it? Oh,
You mind sending that to?
yes, I will. There was also another section where we talk about Windsor Housing Authority. Yeah, page 5.
Which,
Oh, you're back on
you're on the other one.
Second, the latest.
No, the second one is a special meeting on the 19th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right.
And please, I got the wrong dates in here. I was at the second meeting I was not at. So that's what I'm abstaining on.
So the second meeting, do we have a motion?
No moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carried. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
8:58.
My good gumption.